So, Paul Fox.
Hello.
You're here, fresh from New Zealand.
Yes. Well, I've been here a week and a half now, and fresh from Blacksburg, Virginia.
Right. Okay.
San Francisco,
yeah.
New Zealand, San Francisco, Blacksburg. Yeah.
Sure. So why don't you explain your? I always ask everybody, like, what's your deal? Who are you? What's your deal? This is the first time you're here. What would you call yourself? A sound designer? What is your official? What do you call yourself?
Yeah, sound designer's like the best way to
Okay.
describe it. Although there's different versions of that for different people. So
Okay.
not a musical sound designer, but yeah, I make we say sound effects design to differentiate from the musical type. But yeah, and yeah, mostly for games. I like working on film too.
Oh, okay. So you do both. Okay.
Yeah, mostly games though. But right now where I live, I don't live in really much of an entertainment hub. But we do have people that like to make films. And,
Okay.
Have some friends that
Sure.
are involved in that.
So, okay, you've had quite a career trajectory. I was checking. I've known you for a while, but I was checking your LinkedIn out. My favorite social network, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. You almost kind of started out doing ringtones. You ended up kind of doing ringtones for Jamdat.
That was kind of actually, so that was in between, but maybe
Okay.
it got sorted.
Sure.
Because yeah, my first game job was at Novalogic,
Right.
which I think I was still at Novalogic when I did that job. Don't tell them.
Well, that's kind of how Jamdat worked. I worked with Jamdat as well. I did some of their launch titles.
I mean, yeah, it was like
Yeah.
20 something years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a friend who was at Jamdat, and yeah, she hit me up to see if I could help them out, and it was like I did like a bunch of, and that was more musical stuff actually. The job I'd had before that, straight out, I went to Cal Arts and I graduated, and I got this job at a company that was making, how do you describe it? The guy that ran the company knew that the mobile smartphone was coming, but it wasn't there yet. We were still using crappy little Nokias, and so he had this whole like production pipeline he had him and his team had built to create entertainment media for something like a smartphone. But we would test it. It was all sprite-based animations, and we were using synthesized voices,
Right.
which sounded terrible. But we had people, like a room full, like 3 or 4 people whose job was just all day voice coding. They would take like a script and they'd sit there with, what was it called, Deck Talk? Or what we were using was like a system called Deck Talk, which was this was like late 90s tech for voice synth coding. And so you could control like pitch and speed and maybe a few other parameters. It was really rudimentary and it sounded terrible. But at least if a human spent a few hours per sentence trying to get it to sound good, it would sound like 5% better.
Yeah, because I was just wondering, because when I saw Jamdat on your...
Oh, sorry. So wait, I'm being long-winded. So
no, it's fine.
Getting to Jamdat. So I worked there and I was making music and sound effects and we ended up going into real voice production. Anyway, we would mail a CD-ROM to people who were still on dial-up, and they would install this like sprite pack, and it had sounds and shit on it, and they had a dial-up internet connection because we used the low bandwidth connection to simulate what it might be like to have a smartphone.
That's right, yeah.
And anyway, so somehow they would connect to us, and then we just downloaded them like a text file that would have all the control data for the sprites and sounds that they'd already installed, so we wouldn't have to push that through. And yeah. Anyway, so I got a lot of practice making musical MIDI files because we were relying on General MIDI to play on the user side to do the music for the show. There were these little shows that would last like 15 seconds or, well, maybe a couple minutes. The opening of the show would be 1 to 2 seconds long, and I had to write these like sound-alikes of like Entertainment Tonight and other shows like that, because we had these weird characters that would do sort of shows like that. Anyway, when I got that Jamdat thing, it was kind of like perfect because I was so practiced at making stuff sound a certain way with MIDI files, and I was doing all these MIDI demos of different ideas I had for logos. I think I sent them like 15, 20 different ideas, and they picked like 5 and said, "Can you improve these?" And yeah, they ended up using one, but I don't know what it was even on now. I can't remember. But yeah, Jamdat, they were at the EA complex down in the Marina.
Yeah,
Marina
they
Del
also
Rey.
had an office off the 405. I had to be. I was just wondering because I was wondering if you were one of those guys that was making money back then, making MIDI knockoffs of popular songs as ringtones. Because there were people making money doing that back then.
Yeah, no, I have somewhere on one of my drives, I have a folder full of that stuff because there were a lot of really cool like heavy metal ones. People would transcribe like Iron Maiden and like just perfectly do the guitar solos and stuff. And I just, that stuff was really funny to hear and listen to because people would put so much work into it, but it just would sound like a cartoon, like silliness. And then I started getting into like Middle Eastern ones. There's guys in Egypt and the Middle East that were doing like Arabic music, and it was just, I mean, anyway, that stuff's...
Yeah, there's a YouTube channel that archives a lot of ringtones, and I do like it quite a bit because I think some of them now are kind of good. Like, some of them are good, the original ones.
There was a website, I think, called Vikram's MIDI Tones.
Oh, okay.
Where I got a lot... There's this guy who just collected them, and he just posted them on his site, and you could just grab any of them. There's actually a classical music archives, is it called? There's a website that was the same thing, but classical music. I have one piece of music on there. Like I transcribed a piece of Baroque, Baroque recorder, 2 recorders. Anyway.
No, okay.